I'm Rhonda from Dutch Growers, and for anybody who's an orchid lover out there, as I am, I'm going to teach you how to repot an orchid today. So the first thing to remember about these orchids is they grow on trees in the tropics, and they really don't need anything to grow on, so they shoot their roots into the bark. But when you get them in the stores, they usually are packed in what's called a sphagnum moss. You don't want to repot your orchid when it has full flowers on it. If your blooms have been on your flower for about 6 to 8 months and they start to droop and fall off, you can certainly repot them then. And a good rule of thumb is to repot them once a year. There's 2 types of mediums you can use to repot orchids. One of them is an orchid bark. That is very common. Different brands, very common. This is the brand we sell here. And this is the orchid bark, which has to be soaked at least 24 hours to 48 hours before repotting your orchid. The other thing you can use is sphagnum moss. This is very common. When you purchase your orchid, this is usually what they are put in. They will hold a lot more water. So what I'm going to do today though is I'm going to use the bark because I've been letting it soak for 2 days. So here is an orchid. All the blooms have fallen off, so it's a great time to repot it. First of all, you might want to put on a pair of gloves because there's always little spiky things in the soil. And I'm going to show you how to get rid of all the moss. So you just start tearing it apart. And like I say, it holds an awful lot of water, so you don't have to water them that often. So I'm just taking all the moss off here. And you don't, because you bought it in moss, you certainly don't have to repot it in moss. It's entirely up to you which medium you want to use. The other thing, you really should use a pot when repotting that has lots of ventilation. Now the pots that they come in has lots of holes in the bottom. A lot of the nursery pots that you get for our orchids have slits in the side. You need that for the roots to breathe. So I'm going to start showing you the roots here, and the dead roots you can actually cut off. So you can see some of these roots here. You can see which ones are dead. They're a darker color, and they're not holding any of the water anymore in them. And you can trim your orchid plant. Once it's all finished blooming, you can actually trim it right down here, which we're going to do. I'll show you how to do that. So I've got almost all the moss off. I'm not sure if you can see, there's some stringy little stems coming out of the roots. And those are the ones that you want to try and protect. So I've got almost all the moss off. Now I'm going to start cutting to give you an idea of where you can cut. So I'm going to take these shears. You might want to just sterilize them before using, because we use them a lot for different plants in here. So this is just an alcohol swab. So just sterilize your pruning shears. And I'm going to start cutting some of these dead roots. Now this one you can see it's where it's alive, and then I'm going to just cut right here. The other thing, you can even pull them off if they're dead. And this is the root that you're going to see. So I'm going to cut this dead one off here, right at the top. Away you go. This one I'm going to cut off. And these look, I could probably do a bit more trimming here. And if you have these little strings, that's great. That's all part of the root system. So you can see there's still lots of healthy root left. So the next thing you want to do is rinse off your roots. This is clean water, it's got no fertilizer in it. So just rinse them off gently so you get rid of all that moss. Wow, it looks pretty good. A few more I could probably trim. So now we're going to repot it. It's really a simple process. I'm going to take a little bit of this bark. So I just put a little bit in the bottom of the pot. Now I'm going to take my roots and I'm going to just put everything down in there. And you want to get the leaves so they're just kind of at the top of the pot. Then you take your moss or your bark that you have soaked and just start putting it around the plant. Don't want to get any air pockets in there, so just gently push it down. I'm going to put it in all around the roots. I'm using the same pot I took it out of, just to give you an idea. We have some really nice pots in the store that are meant for orchids because the roots can grow out of them. You can pop them directly into those pots. You don't have to use one of these pots. So I'm just going to tap it down a bit. Make sure I don't have any air pockets in there. Some of the clear plastic ones you can kind of see if there's any air pockets. So there we go, it's all repotted. Another thing you want to remember is when you have flowers on your orchid is to use fertilizer. That's really the only time you need to fertilize. And we have various types of fertilizer here in the store. So now I'm going to cut the stem off because it's done blooming. As you know, the Phalaenopsis orchids, they usually bend down, so you can get little twist ties or little clips that come with them, and that helps to keep it sturdy instead of flopping all over. And then you'll usually get a stick with them. You'll want to save the stick because once it starts growing again, you just use it for your new plant. You don't always have to cut your stem off. They're going to start growing out of here. It'll die off and you probably will get growing out wherever you want. It's totally up to you. But I'm going to cut mine down today. So if you can see, I'm going to cut it right near the bottom. And there we go. It's done. So there you go. Your orchid is all repotted. And I'm going to just put it in here. And then if you want, you can certainly repot your orchid right into here. Put your bark in, and then your plant, and then the pot. A lot of people like the roots showing and they'll start growing out of here and you can see how healthy they are. But for this one, I just put it back in the nursery pot and back into here. So for watering your orchid, you'll want to take it to your sink and soak it really good until it's wet. Let it drain really well. It needs to be in a well-draining pot. And terracotta pots work very well as well. Once it's drained, put it back in your pot. Put it back on the shelf in a bright sunny location and leave it for about 2 to 3 weeks. So that's how you repot an orchid. Come on down to Dutch Growers. We have some beautiful orchids in some different colors and we'll help you pick out a plant and a pot and certainly show you again how to repot it if you want. Thank you.